G'day guys, it's Thursday afternoon, it's preview time on My Blue Heaven. I'm here to take a look at our round 11 clash against the Collingwood Football Club at the mecca of football, the MCG, 20 past 3 Sunday afternoon. Us third on the AFL ladder after 10 rounds, and the Pies sitting just outside the top 8 at the moment in 10th position. I think I've spoken at length over the last couple of episodes about the importance of remaining inside that top 4. You don't need to be Einstein to work that out. When it comes to finals time, and the expectations before the start of the year was to play finals. Now that's suddenly changed from my point. So is top 4 now the new expectation? And that gives us a genuine chance. It has to give you a genuine chance if you can finish inside the top 4. So that makes every game a little bit at this stage of the year is a little bit on edge about any type of opposition, wherever that may be. And it's no different facing Collingwood, who are in some terrific form themselves after a great win against Fremantle last weekend in Perth. That win-loss, we've spoken about the 8-2. Pies haven't been shabby. 5-5 is pretty good for them, considering what their expectations were coming into this season. So they are knocking on the door of playing finals themselves. So this is a big game for them. And the 9-day break for us and a home game last week in Melbourne, compared to the 7-day break of the Pies travelling to Perth. I don't know how much you read into that sort of stuff. And you could probably look at both sides. Road trip to Perth, 7-day break. I think 7 days enough these days, considering the resources available to AFL footballers. But you could also think 9 days is really good through soreness, but at the same time, is that too long? In between games. And you sort of start to think about it too much. So, I don't know. I've just mentioned that 9-day break versus 7-day break. We understand the history between these two clubs. It is great. First met in 1892, played 260 times. I was actually blown away. I knew head-to-head was close, but I didn't know it was level, 128 apiece and 4 draws. And we know the records in grand finals, and that's where we've got the Pies, and that's why the feeling of superiority, I suppose, if you look at it that way, that we always, and this is history now, we're always able to, particularly in 70, 79, 81, and I remember 79 and 81, but we got the chocolates. And I suppose that gives us a little bit of sense of superiority, but really does it mean much at all? Every game is played on its merits, and I understand the banter that goes on between supporters of both clubs. But I just, from my perspective, I just want to win. I wouldn't care if we were facing the Gold Coast Suns this weekend, or Footscray, or Geelong. I wouldn't give a shit. I just want to win, and consolidate that position inside the top 4. They play for the Peter Mac Cup. Been doing that since 1993, and since 2010. They play for it on Collingwood home games. So it's a Collingwood home game. So the Peter Mac Cup is up for grabs. Last meeting, don't know how significant that was, considering 2 new coaches and given the time of year, round 18 last year. But it was sweet for us. We had that barnstorming last quarter where we kicked 6 goals to Collingwood's zip after trailing by 8 points at 3-quarter time to run out 29-point winners. And I suppose it was just a small snapshot. And I've mentioned this in the past as well, when we played Adelaide last year, that we had that period in that quarter where we just piled on 8 goals really quickly. It was sort of similar in this game against the Pies. We dominated out of the middle, and they couldn't stop Harry, who kicked 4 in the last quarter. And it's sort of, I don't know, it's sort of, at times this year, reminds me of that game against Collingwood, reminds me of that game against Adelaide, or also reminds me of that game late in the year against St Kilda when we were on fire. But Walsh 39 and a goal was unbelievable that night, so I'm sure they'll put a lot of work into him. They've got a lot to think about Collingwood in that regards, who they go to. And Walsh playing a little bit different sort of a bit differently this year. He's sort of starting at half forward and not going into as many centre bounces. Kennedy had 26 and a goal. It was sort of the start of his really good patch coming into this season. And Big H, as I mentioned, kicked 4 goals in the last quarter. We don't have him this time around. It's just Charlie. And I rate De Goey. And I know outside of Collingwood, there's probably a perception that he's a little bit inconsistent. He floats in and out of games. Well, I watch all Collingwood games. He's super consistent. He was really good that night. He had 31 touches. I really rate him both as a midfielder and forward. I think from that perspective, I think he's pretty underrated. He's had a pretty good season this year as well. And Henry kicked 3. It's bizarre, isn't it? He was a baby last year. He kicked 3 against us and was really dangerous. And then you have that. I mean, he came on as a medical sub last week. So, I worry about that kid's ability to step up, and yeah, he's a good young player. Noble, I really rate as well. Him and Isaac Quainer need to be watched. I think when Collingwood get that drive, it comes from both Quainer and also Noble. He was good last year with 25, and who could forget Liam Stocker's big bump on Brody Myercheck, which we could hear just echoing through the deserted streets of Melbourne. And I could hear it all the way out to Werribee. It was that quiet because of COVID last year. There was no one at that game last year, and it was a Sunday afternoon, 3:20, but there'll be 80 plus there this Sunday, and it's just going to be absolutely deafening. That game, though, Teague, Buckley, both gone. New eras for both football clubs. Different game plans, different styles, different beliefs, different energy. It just feels different for both clubs. Voss, McRae, we know the history between them two. Both came through Brisbane Lions, premiership players, three-peat. Just an unbelievable dynasty, that one. As Michael Voss as a leader and McRae just a hard-working midfielder. Obviously got a really, really good footy brain. And he's got his great mate, Justin Leppage, as his right-hand man as head of strategy. So it's a nice little coaching group that Collingwood have got going, and we know we're pretty happy with ours as well. And just sort of floating in the background is Brendan Greenshoots Bolton, who is the director of coaching at Collingwood, and he'll have a few little ideas that he'll throw Craig McRae's way about Carlton. So the coach's box is going to be really, really pivotal in this game, and obviously Michael Voss is such a competitor. The Pies, they've had just a couple of bad wins which has soured them, but so have we. But the one that I suppose soured them was the Eagles one. But they started the year off really well with back-to-back wins against St Kilda, and then the Crows, who were always up and about early in the year, the Adelaide Crows. They lost in a close one against Geelong, and I rate Geelong. I still really rate Geelong. Round 3 at the MCG. And then they had that stinker against an undermanned West Coast at Marvel. But they fought back and had a close loss against Brisbane up at the Gabba. And then they smacked Essendon on Anzac Day. And then a couple of losses. Richmond got them, and then the Bulldogs gave them a hiding where they were never in that game at Marvel. I'm not quite sure about Collingwood at Marvel Stadium. There's something not quite right there. And they got back on the winners board last week in a terrific win against the Fremantle Dockers. And I must say, watching that game very closely, I know Collingwood supporters, or most Collingwood supporters, would probably, they wouldn't have probably felt the same way, but I don't know, mate. 10-15 minutes into that second quarter, I just knew that they were going to win that game. They had complete control, and it was no surprise in the end that they ran out really easy winners. They just beat Fremantle up on the inside. They just smacked them, with their ferocity and their tackling. And the weather, admittedly the weather suited them, but I've seen Collingwood play some really good football in dry conditions as well. I think their transition work from their defence can be dangerous, the way they move the ball. They can score. I'll get to that shortly. Selection's going to be interesting. Do they roll the dice with Mason Cox, or do they prefer him to not play him. They've now got Henry. Can Henry do that a second week running? Was that, a bit of a flash in the pan? I'm not saying it was for the kid, but do they bring back Mason Cox as that big, imposing forward to stretch Carlton? Carlton have got Young, they've got Wiedering. Or do they go smaller? Does Cameron need support in the ruck, Darcy Cameron? Or do they bring in Aiden Begg? Weather looks fine. Yeah, I've got a feeling they might bring back Cox if his finger's okay, but we're just going to have to wait and see. And us, obviously, is Martin ready to go? Does he come back straight back in? Dow's form in the VFL. They've had a couple of really bad losses in the VFL. Has his form tapered off late in games? Does he deserve an opportunity? Is he doing what they're asking of him? Does he come in for Jack Carroll, whose form has tapered a little bit after a couple of really good games early, and then his last two have been pretty quiet? Is he rested? Does Motlock? I don't think Motlock goes out. I think he's just been really good in his first couple of games. Does Martin start as the sub? And just the smoky from my point of view, and I'm not saying he should come in, but don't be surprised if something happens that Jack Nunes comes in. Whether it is as a medical sub or whether he comes into the side. I just don't know. I just got this feeling about Jack Nunes that his form was actually okay on those wings, him and Cottrell on those wings. Him and O'Brien on those wings. But Cottrell has been okay as well. But you look at those wings as Collingwood, side bottom and Dacos, that's pretty bloody strong. We're just going to have to wait and see. They can score. They've scored 100 points 3 times, the Pies. They really struggled in that aspect last year. My check's a gun. And I know Stocker got him with that big bump last year, but he's a bloody hard-working, very good footballer. So Wiedering's going to have his work cut out. He works his backside off Brody Mychick. He's kicked 21 for the year. Jack Ginnivan, he loves the big stage. It's just got to send Stocker. I mean, the theatre of Stocker going to Jack Ginnivan, I think that'd be wonderful. Henry's kicked the 12, career high 4 last week. And, DeGoey 10, Darcy Cameron 9. And I reckon Oscar Elliott's finally hit some form for the Pies as well. He's starting to move pretty well and can be dangerous. The stats are interesting. We know Collingwood are ranked 2 in the competition for tackles, and they were excellent in that regard last week against the Dockers. They just did not give them any space at all. They could not get their game going. The Fremantle Dockers, Crisp, Adams, Tyler Brown, Jamie Elliott, they're averaging over 5 tackles a game, those boys, and they're a really hard tackling football team, and they can do some damage on the spread as well, Collingwood. But they're ranked number 14th in the competition for clearances, and we know particularly out of the middle, that that's our one wood. That's our one wood, work out of the middle, the clearance work out of the middle. And we are ranked number 1 in the competition for disposals and marks, and Collingwood are ranked 18 in the competition for marks. So they're going to have to try and stop that somehow, Collingwood. And it's all about the contest work and what they do around that contest. And I don't know. I look at this game and I see have we got that ability? And we know our midfield is really purring now, and I think it's even come a long way over the course of the year in regards to the way we set up and getting that right mix, particularly in that centre. Are we able to get that first possession away, so win the clearance and get that clear space with that first possession? If Collingwood can somehow stifle us in that regards, and that's why they're probably a little bit better in the wetter conditions at doing that. That makes it really difficult for us to get our game going. And they've got some experience in there. Obviously, Adams and Crisp and Pendlebury has sort of gone back into middle a little bit. We're all experienced footballers, so they know what they're doing. They've got Lipinski and DeGoey, I suppose, on the outside, and Dacos and Sidebottom on their wings. But it's all about that contest and whether we can get that first and second handball away, and then we can spread. If we're able to do that, we're going to make it very, very hard for Collingwood, regardless of still really when we've only really got that one key forward in Charlie. Because if we give our forwards enough opportunities and enough looks, we just know that those three smalls plus Jack Silvani, they're going to apply an enormous amount of pressure. But then you think about if we're unable to do that, if Collingwood can just somehow stifle that work around the stoppages, similar to what the Gold Coast Suns did to us, we might find it hard to stop their sort of transition in their speed of ball movement, because they're really good at it, and they can kick scores. So this is the big one for me. That if we can just get on top, and because we know what we need to do forward of centre in regards to that pressure, particularly through that smalls, and that will need to be on. And sometimes I think, though, I know it's worked over the last couple of weeks, we've kicked 100 points plus, but how sustainable is that over the next few weeks? Does Charlie have to do it all by himself? It's a really interesting one. I know Silvani's really important in that aspect as well, but it's a big ask. It's a big ask for Charlie to be doing each week, and we know he's going to be up. If you look at the key matchup, he's going to be up against Darcy Moore. Is Darcy Moore a great one-on-one defender? We know the damage he can do. He's a really good mark. I don't know. It's going to be a really good one. That's just like an amazing matchup. Wiedering v Mycheck up the other end. I mentioned that one. Wiedering's been in some terrific form, and Mycheck's just, as I mentioned, one of the most hardest working sort of key forwards in the game. The TDK Darcy Cameron one's fascinating. Both really still early in regards to their rucking career. I don't think they've played more than 40 games. I know TDK hasn't, and I reckon Darcy Cameron wouldn't have played much more than 30. The age difference, though, TDK is only 22. I didn't realise Darcy Cameron was already 26. But they sort of play a similar style. What I'm really impressed with Darcy Cameron is the ability to get back and support his defenders, and he takes some. He's a strong mark. And you look at that at the moment. Has both teams really lost anything at the moment with Grundy and Pitnet? I suppose we probably lost more with Pitnet just because we are such a strong clearance team, and whether Grundy was actually giving his midfielders first use. It's an interesting one. Pie supporters would probably know more about that than me. The Plowman one will be interesting. Does he go to Elliott, who always gives us headaches? Came back in and was pretty good last week. And Degoe, if he goes forward. I mentioned the wings. I think side bottom, Lockie O'Brien, both got probably the biggest engines at the football club, outside of Cottrell, obviously, but that's going to be, side bottom's still a really good footballer, and Dacos and Cottrell on the other wing, and Josh Dacos is just all class. He has the ability to drift forward and turn games, whereas Cottrell doesn't. So is that more of a defensive game on a Josh Dacos? I mentioned Stocker and Ginnivan, and I want to keep Jeremy Howe honest, really honest, and if that's up to Jack Silvani to do that, because Howe, we know what he's able to do as an intercept defender. Looking forward to it. I just don't know which way to go. Obviously, I'm relatively sort of confident in our form, and I believe if we play at our absolute best and bring our best, that we should be okay. But I'm also very conscious that if Collingwood bring their absolute best, that they have some things in their armour that, if we are slightly down, that could hurt us. So that's the way that I'm feeling at the moment. Speak to you soon.